This story is titled, When Father Learned How Much I Earn, He Seized My House for Golden Sister, but I had a revenge plan to make him regret it. Hey everyone, I'm 29 years old now and working as an architectural designer. There's a story that's been eating me up inside that I need to share with all of you. It's been weighing on me for years, and I think writing it down might help me process everything that's happened. Life wasn't always as good as it is now. I lost my real mom to cancer when I was just 4 years old. It was devastating, even though I was too young to fully understand what was happening. My dad was left to raise me on his own for a few years until he remarried when I was 7. He was 40 at the time, and his new wife Diana was 33. Diana seemed nice at first. She did that typical trying too hard stepmom thing where she wanted to bond with me and be my friend. She'd make my favorite foods, buy me little gifts, and try to engage with my interests. I was young and hopeful that maybe things would be okay after all. But everything changed dramatically when she had my half-sister Lucy. After Lucy was born, my dad became super harsh with me. Nothing I ever did was good enough for him anymore. I remember getting a B+ on this advanced physics test in high school. Instead of being proud of me for doing well in such a difficult class, he just stared at me with disappointment and asked, "Why isn't this an A?" When I made the varsity basketball team in my sophomore year, his only response was, "Why aren't you starting?" It was that kind of criticism, all the time, no matter what I achieved. But with Lucy, that was a completely different story. She could fail a test, and my dad would comfort her saying, "Oh honey, it's okay, you tried your best." Diana made sure Lucy was treated like a princess in our household, while I was relegated to being the family disappointment. Every accomplishment of mine was dismissed, while Lucy's smallest efforts were celebrated. I'm pretty sure I had undiagnosed ADHD growing up. I couldn't sit still in class and had trouble focusing on lectures and homework. Instead of getting me the help I needed, my dad would just scream at me when my grades slipped or when teachers called home about my behavior. His favorite line, one that still haunts me to this day, was, "Why can't you just be normal like your sister?" Diana would stand there nodding in agreement, like I was some broken toy that needed fixing rather than a child who needed support. My dad worked crazy hours at his construction company and wasn't home much. That's when Diana showed her true colors. She would forget to make enough dinner for me, forcing me to make myself peanut butter sandwiches while she and Lucy ate properly cooked meals. She would deliberately ruin my clothes in the wash, bleach stains on my favorite shirts, shrinking my jeans. Little things that I couldn't prove were intentional. If I told my dad about any of this, he'd say I was just causing trouble because that's what Diana had led him to believe about me. The mind games were the worst part of living with Diana. She'd move my stuff around and then tell my dad I was being messy. Something would break in the house, and somehow it was always my fault. My dad believed every word she said without question. After all, why would Diana lie? She had him completely wrapped around her finger, and there was nothing I could do about it. Then came the day that changed everything. I was walking home from school one afternoon, taking my usual shortcut through Monroe Park, when I spotted Diana with some guy by the old pavilion. At first, I thought maybe it was just a friend or whatever. Nothing to be concerned about. But as I got closer, I realized that wasn't the case at all. They were kissing, and not just a quick peck either. This was a full-on passionate embrace between two people who clearly weren't just friends. I'm pretty sure Diana saw me running away after I witnessed their kiss. The worst part was that I recognized the guy. His name was Ryan, and he used to come to our house sometimes for these charity meetings Diana was supposedly running. He was a real buff dude, always wearing expensive suits and looking like he lived at the gym. I had no idea what to do with this information. Tell my dad? Yeah, right, like he'd believe me. Diana had spent years making sure my dad thought I was just a troublemaker who was jealous of her and Lucy. Plus, Lucy was 8 at the time, and my dad was completely obsessed with her. He'd probably think I was just trying to cause problems out of spite or jealousy, so I kept my mouth shut and tried to forget what I saw. But once you see something like that, you start noticing things you can't unsee. Like how Lucy's hair was this weird reddish-brown color that nobody else in the family had. My dad never noticed these things. He was too busy with work to see anything suspicious happening right in front of him. One night, I got up to grab some water and heard Diana on the phone in the kitchen. I was about to walk in when I stopped dead in my tracks after hearing her tone. She was whispering, but I caught enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "You don't understand Ryan. He's starting to notice," she said quietly. At first, I didn't know who she meant, but then she continued, "He thinks she's his, but we both know the truth. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I knew exactly who she was talking about. Lucy. My dad wasn't her father. Ryan was. I must have made some noise because Diana suddenly went quiet and then called out in that fake, sweet voice of hers. "Honey, you shouldn't be up this late." I bolted back to my room before she could see me, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might throw up. I didn't have any concrete proof, but I knew the truth now, and I also knew that Diana would do anything to keep me from telling my dad. Diana must have figured out that I knew something because she started watching me like a hawk, especially around Lucy. I couldn't even walk past Lucy's room without Diana appearing out of nowhere asking, "What are you doing?" She began telling my dad that I was acting weird around Lucy. I understand now what she was doing. She was building up to something, making my dad suspicious of me. I remember one time I was just helping Lucy with multiplication tables, basic math stuff that any older sibling might help with. And Diana came in and practically yanked Lucy away, saying she would help instead. Later, she told my dad I was getting too close to Lucy. The way she said it still makes me feel sick thinking about it. She was planting seeds, setting me up for something terrible. That's how things went for about 2 weeks. Diana was watching my every move, whispering things to my dad when she thought I couldn't hear. My dad started giving me these weird, suspicious looks at dinner. I tried staying out of the house as much as possible, but that just made everything worse. Diana told my dad I was probably doing drugs. Nobody even asked if I was okay. Nobody cared that my grades were tanking from the stress. My dad just got madder and madder at me with each passing day. About 2 weeks after seeing Diana with Ryan, I came home from school like normal. Something felt off right away. There were 2 police cars parked outside our house, and I could hear Diana crying before I even opened the door. It wasn't genuine crying, though. It was that super fake crying people do for attention. The kind where they're more concerned with who's watching than with whatever they're supposedly upset about. I walked inside to find Diana on the couch crying her eyes out with 2 cops sitting across from her. My dad was standing in the corner, looking like he was about to murder someone. Lucy was nowhere to be seen. Everyone stopped talking when I came in. One of the officers stood up and asked if we could talk. They took me to the kitchen while the other cop stayed with Diana and my dad. That's when they told me the accusation. Diana and Lucy had told them I'd been touching Lucy, like inappropriately touching her. My brain just shut down. I couldn't even process what they were saying. I kept repeating, "What? No? That never happened," over and over, but they just kept asking these horrible questions. Where did I touch her? How many times did I threaten her to keep quiet? I felt like I was going to throw up. I could hear Diana in the other room, still doing that fake crying thing, saying things like, "I should have known. I saw the signs." My dad wasn't saying anything, just standing there with his fists clenched in rage. The cops asked if I wanted to make a statement. I told them Diana was lying, that she was trying to get rid of me because I saw her cheating on my dad. That was a big mistake. They didn't believe me at all. My dad completely lost it when he heard me say that. He started screaming about how I was trying to ruin his marriage, that I was jealous of Lucy, and called me every horrible name you can think of. He said I was sick in the head and needed help. The cops couldn't find any actual evidence, obviously, since nothing had ever happened. Plus, I was only 15, but the damage was already done. My dad threw a garbage bag at me and said I had 10 minutes to pack my stuff and get out. He threatened that if I ever came near Lucy again, he'd kill me himself. I tried one more time to tell him about Diana and Ryan, but he literally grabbed me by my shirt and shoved me toward the stairs. I had never seen him that angry before. Diana was standing there with this tiny smirk that only I could see. She had won. I grabbed whatever clothes I could fit in the bag and stuffed my school backpack with a few other essentials. I tried to get my GameCube, but my dad said everything in the house was his since he paid for it. The whole time I was upstairs, I could hear Diana downstairs, probably making sure my dad stayed angry at me. When I came back down, Lucy was there. She looked confused, like she didn't understand what was happening. Diana had her arms wrapped around her, like she was protecting her from me. That's what kills me the most when I think back on it. The look on Lucy's face. She was just a kid, and Diana had used her own daughter as a weapon to get rid of me. My dad told me to give him my house key and said I wasn't his son anymore. Diana made this fake sad face and said, "Maybe someday you'll get the help you need." I wanted to scream that she was lying, that she was the one who needed help. But what was the point? They weren't going to believe me. They watched me leave, probably making sure I actually went. I looked back once and saw my dad holding Lucy and Diana while Diana was still doing that fake crying thing. The last thing I heard was my dad telling Lucy she was safe now. I walked around for hours that night. I had like $40 in my wallet and no idea what to do. I couldn't go to any of my friends' houses because Diana had already told all their parents I was some kind of predator. She had planned this whole thing perfectly. I eventually found this abandoned building where some homeless guys stayed. They let me crash there that first night, and that's where I lived for the next few months. I couldn't go to school anymore, obviously. I couldn't get a real job either since I was only 15. I did some stuff I'm not proud of just to eat and survive. The worst part of it all was that Diana had made sure everyone in town heard her version of events. I couldn't go anywhere without people giving me these disgusted looks. I lost all my friends. Even teachers who used to like me wouldn't talk to me anymore. My whole life was just gone, completely destroyed because of Diana's lies. That's why I eventually had to leave town altogether. I ended up spending about 6 months in that abandoned building. It was this old warehouse near the train tracks where 5 or 6 other homeless guys were living too. Most of them were actually decent people who had just had bad luck in life. This older guy named Frank kind of took me under his wing. He'd been living on the streets for years after his wife died and he lost his job. He taught me all kinds of valuable survival skills: where to get food, which places would let you use their bathroom without being a customer, how to stay warm in winter. Basic stuff I never thought I'd need to know. I kept thinking my dad would eventually snap out of it, realize the truth, and come looking for me. But he never did. He just didn't care about what happened to me. I tried getting jobs around town, but nobody would hire me. Diana had made sure everyone knew her version of the story. Even Burger King turned me down. I was that guy everyone whispered about at the grocery store. Parents would literally pull their kids away if they saw me coming. I started doing some sketchy stuff to get by. Nothing violent, but yeah, I'm not proud of that time in my life. Frank kept telling me I needed to leave town and start fresh somewhere else, but I was scared. I was just a kid, really. Where was I supposed to go? How was I supposed to survive on my own in a new place? Then one night, some cops showed up at the warehouse. Someone had reported us for trespassing. They gave us 10 minutes to clear out or face arrest. I lost most of my stuff that night. What little I had left anyway. Frank and I walked to the next town over, which took us all night. We ended up at this truck stop diner, counting my money. I had like $27 left to my name. That's when Frank told me he had a cousin in the city who might be able to help. He said his cousin managed some restaurants and owed him a favor. The city was about 200 miles away. But what else was I going to do? Frank gave me his cousin's address and the last $40 he had, telling me to get out while I still could. He said he was too old to start over, but I still had a chance at a better life. I never saw Frank again after that day. Sometimes I wonder what happened to him and hope he's okay wherever he is. I took a Greyhound bus to the city and spent my first week sleeping in the bus station. I finally worked up the courage to find Frank's cousin Dave. He wasn't anything like what I had expected. He was a real clean-cut guy who managed 3 different restaurants. Dave gave me a job washing dishes at this fancy Italian place. The first few months were rough. I was sleeping in the restaurant storage room because Dave let me crash there after hours. I saved every penny I could, and finally got enough to rent this tiny room in a really bad part of town. But hey, it was mine, and that meant something to me. I started learning everything I could about the restaurant business. I moved up from dishes to prep cook, then to line cook. The head chef noticed I was good with numbers and started teaching me about food costs and inventory management. I was soaking up knowledge like a sponge, determined to make something of myself despite everything that had happened. The restaurant had this regular customer named Claire who would come in with her mom about twice a week. After I became a waiter, she always requested to sit in my section. Claire was in college studying business, and we would talk whenever it wasn't too busy. She was the first person in years who didn't look at me like I was garbage. I remember exactly what she said the first night we really spoke. "Hey, what's good here?" she asked, actually looking at me instead of the menu like most customers do. "The carbonara is pretty great," I replied. "Marco makes the sauce from scratch." I probably sounded like an idiot, but I was just happy someone was treating me like a normal person. "You actually know who makes the food?" she asked with surprise in her voice. "Most places I go, the servers just read the specials and disappear," she added with a smile. We ended up talking for about 10 minutes about food. Her mom just sat there smiling at our interaction. "Claire, stop bothering the poor waiter," she finally said. "He has other tables." Claire looked around the empty restaurant and laughed. "Yeah, Mom, he's clearly swamped." They started coming in more often after that, always requesting my section. I learned that Claire was studying business at the local college. Sometimes she would bring her homework with her and work on it at the table. One night, she was struggling with some accounting problems. "This makes no sense," she groaned, staring at her textbook. "How can a company lose money, but still show a profit?" "Creative accounting," I said while refilling her water. "They're probably moving numbers around to make it look good for investors." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "How do you know about corporate accounting?" The truth was, I had been reading business books at the library. I wanted to understand how restaurants worked, maybe even open my own someday. I told her this, and she got super excited. "That's amazing! Most people our age don't care about this stuff," she said enthusiastically. "Hey, want to look at this problem with me?" Next thing I knew, I was sitting at her table during my break, helping her with her homework. Her mom just watched us with this knowing smile on her face. This became our routine for months. Claire would come in, we'd talk about business stuff, and I would try not to fall in love with her. I failed miserably at that last part. She was so smart, but she never made me feel stupid for not having her level of education. One time she asked me, "I don't get why you're working here. You're clearly good at this business stuff." "Not everyone can afford college," I mumbled, feeling embarrassed about my circumstances. "You don't need college to be successful," she said confidently. "My dad never went, and he owns 3 companies now. He says experience matters more than degrees." That conversation stuck with me. I started thinking maybe I could do more than just work in restaurants. I eventually got my GED by studying at the library on my days off. Claire helped me with the math parts. She never asked about my past, and I never told her. I was too scared she'd stop talking to me if she knew the truth. That was my life for about 5 years. Wake up, work, study, sleep, repeat. I didn't date, didn't really make friends. I just focused on surviving and trying to be better than I was the day before. The whole time, I kept thinking about Lucy, hoping Diana wasn't messing her up too badly. One night, Claire came in looking super excited about something. She could barely contain herself as she sat down at her usual table. "Guess what?" she exclaimed with a bright smile. "Dad's looking for someone to help manage his new property development project. It's an entry-level position, but with lots of room to grow. You should apply." I froze up completely at the suggestion. "Claire, I never even finished high school," I reminded her. "But you got your GED, right?" "That's all that matters," she insisted, not letting my insecurity dampen her enthusiasm. "Come on, just try. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen, I thought to myself, was that she could find out about my past, about Diana's lies, about everything that had happened. But Claire kept pushing. "Please, for me," she pleaded. "Dad trusts my judgment. I know you'd be amazing at this." So I applied for the position. I had to borrow a suit from Dave for the interview, and it still fit weird on me. The interview itself was terrifying. Claire's dad, Robert, just stared at me for a full minute before speaking. "Claire says you understand business," he finally said. "Prove it." Somehow, I managed to talk intelligently about property development trends I'd read about. I even suggested some ideas for his new project. At the end, he just nodded and said, "You start Monday." When I told Claire I got the job, she hugged me. It was the first time anyone had hugged me in years, and I almost cried right there in the restaurant. "See?" she said with a warm smile. "I told you you could do it." That job changed everything for me. Robert became like the father I wished I'd had growing up. He actually listened when I had ideas and taught me everything about real estate development. Within a year, I was managing my own projects and doing well for myself. The whole time, Claire and I grew closer. We'd get coffee after work and talk for hours about everything and nothing. But I never asked her out. I kept thinking about Diana's lies and my past. Claire deserved better than some guy who had lived on the streets, I told myself. Then came the night that changed everything. We were working late on a project proposal, just us in the office. "You know," Claire said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "for someone so smart about business, you're really dumb about some things." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused by her statement. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask me out. I just sat there like an idiot, not knowing what to say. Finally, I managed to admit, I'm not good enough for you. There's stuff about me you don't know." "Try me," she challenged. So I just told her everything, about Diana, about the lies, about being homeless. I kept waiting for her to look disgusted or scared, but instead, she started crying. Then she got mad. Not at me, but at Diana and my dad. "Those horrible people," she said with genuine anger in her voice. How could they do that to their own son? Then she kissed me. She just reached across the desk and kissed me. And yeah, that's how Claire and I finally got together. Claire and I got married pretty quickly after we started dating. Her family was amazing. They actually treated me like a son, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. We had our first kid, a boy, and bought this really nice 5-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. Life was perfect. Then, about 3 months ago, I was scrolling through Facebook at work when I saw a friend request that stopped me cold. The profile picture showed my dad, looking way older than I remembered. I just sat there staring at my phone like an idiot, not knowing how to react. Claire noticed something was wrong as soon as she got home. I was sitting in our kitchen just staring at nothing, completely lost in thought. "Babe, what's wrong?" she asked, putting our son down for his nap. "Dad found me on Facebook," I said quietly. "He sent a friend request." She sat down next to me, concern evident on her face. "What are you going to do?" "No idea," I admitted. "Haven't opened his message yet." "Want me to read it first?" she offered. I handed her my phone. She opened the message and started reading out loud. "Son, I know it's been a long time. I'm getting older now and been thinking a lot about the past. Not a day goes by that I don't think about you. Diana and I want to make things right. Lucy misses her big brother. Please give us a chance to explain. Love, Dad." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Lucy misses me? She probably doesn't even remember me. She was 8 when everything happened. Claire squeezed my hand. "You don't have to respond." But I did respond. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I wanted to know why now, after 16 years of silence. So I accepted the request and messaged back a simple, "Why now?" His response came fast. "I'm 58 now. Had some health scares. Made me realize life's too short for grudges. Lucy's getting married soon. Would mean a lot to have you there." We messaged back and forth for a few weeks. I found out Lucy's 24 now, works in marketing, and is engaged to some lawyer guy. According to my dad, Diana's still the same as she always was. Yeah, bet she is, I thought to myself. Claire kept telling me to be careful. "People don't change that much," she warned. But I wanted to believe my dad had changed. Stupid, right? They asked to visit us. Claire said it was my choice, but she'd support whatever I decided. So I said yes. Big mistake. They showed up on a Saturday morning. My dad looked old, like really old. His hair had gone completely gray, and he walked with a slight limp now. Diana, on the other hand, looked exactly the same. She still had that fake smile plastered on her face like nothing had ever happened. Lucy had grown up, and she looked even more like Ryan now. But nobody seemed to notice that except me. The first few minutes were awkward. Nobody knew what to say. Then Lucy saw our family photos on the wall. "Is this your son?" she asked, looking at pictures of our 3-year-old. "Yeah, that's Jake," I confirmed. "I'm an aunt," she whispered, and then started crying. Diana immediately went to comfort her. Same old Diana, always ready to make a show of being the caring mother. My dad stepped into my house like he belonged there, his eyes sweeping over everything with that barely hidden approval he never used to give me when I was growing up. "You've done well for yourself," he said, nodding as he took in our comfortable home. "Real estate development, huh? Never would have guessed." I folded my arms defensively across my chest, already bracing for whatever this visit was really about. "Robert gave me a chance," I said, letting the words hang in the air between us. Unlike some people, Diana, always the spin doctor, jumped in before the silence could get too heavy. "We all made mistakes back then," she said, her voice syrupy sweet as if she was talking about a minor disagreement rather than destroying a child's life. "We're here to make things right." Claire, who had been standing near the door like she was waiting for a reason to leave, took the out immediately. "I'll check on Jake," she said, disappearing before she could say something she'd regret. Smart woman, my wife. Lucy, though, had no such filter. She wandered through our living room, her fingers skimming across the furniture and walls, like she was trying to claim it all for herself. "This house is amazing," she said, peering down the hallway toward the other rooms. 5 bedrooms, but you only have 1 kid? I forced a polite smile. "Planning for more," I said curtly. "And we use one as an office. Not that it's any of your business," I added silently to myself. My dad clapped a hand on my shoulder, steering me toward my office with that whole let's talk man-to-man routine. I should have seen it as the warning sign it was. He sank into my chair like he owned it, making himself comfortable in my space. "Son," he started, "I need to ask you something important." I remained standing, keeping my guard up. "What?" "Your sister's getting married," he began. starting a family. He let that sit for a second, like it was supposed to mean something significant to me. They're looking for a house, but everything's so expensive these days. My stomach turned as I began to see where this was going. No way. I could already see the direction of this conversation, and I couldn't believe the audacity. "You've got all this space," he continued, gesturing around like he was selling me my own damn home. 5 bedrooms for 3 people. Lucy and Steve could really use a place like this. You're doing well, could easily buy another house. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, hoping this was some kind of sick joke. "Are you seriously asking me to give my house to Lucy?" "Well, not give exactly," he said, like that somehow made it better. "Maybe sell it to them cheap. You make good money now." I literally lost it at that point. "Get out," I said, my voice low but firm. He sighed, exasperated, like I was the one being difficult. "Son, be reasonable. It's your sister." "The sister you chose over me?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. "The one you kicked me out for? That sister?" "That was a misunderstanding," he tried to explain away. I barked out a laugh. "A misunderstanding? You threw me out at 15! I lived on the streets!" He had the nerve to look annoyed, like I was dragging up something inconvenient from the past. "That's in the past. Lucy needs..." "Lucy needs?" My voice rose as I cut him off. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Lucy needs what? What about what I needed? A father who believed me, maybe?" Before he could come up with another excuse, Diana came rushing in with that fake concerned expression plastered on her face. "Everything okay in here?" she asked innocently. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh yeah, Diana. Everything's fantastic." I turned to her, my grin sharp enough to cut glass. "Dad's just asking me to give my house to your daughter. You know, the one who isn't even his." The room went dead silent. Diana's face drained of color instantly. My dad froze in place like someone had hit a pause button on him. Lucy came in looking confused, probably trying to figure out if she'd heard me right. And just like that, the whole game changed. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I just walked out of my office to find Claire and Jake. They were in the backyard, Jake playing with his trucks while Claire watched him. One look at my face and she knew something significant had happened. She quickly took Jake inside while everyone else was still processing what I'd said. Diana immediately went into damage control mode, telling my dad that I was lying, that I was just trying to hurt them like I supposedly always did. Classic Diana move. But this time, my dad wasn't buying it. Maybe because Lucy was standing right there, looking exactly like Ryan. Or maybe he'd had doubts all along. Whatever the reason, he demanded a DNA test right there on the spot. Lucy started crying, not the fake kind like her mom, but real confused tears. She kept asking what was going on, why everyone was yelling. Diana grabbed her arm and practically dragged her out of our house, saying I was just causing trouble again, trying to ruin their lives because I was jealous. The same old accusations she'd always used. My dad stayed behind. He didn't say anything for a long time, just sat in our living room staring at nothing. Then he finally asked me how I knew about Lucy not being his daughter. So I told him everything. About seeing Diana with Ryan in the park when I was 15. About how Lucy looked just like him. About how Diana had framed me when she realized I might tell someone what I'd seen. He didn't believe me at first. Kept saying I was wrong, that Diana would never do that. But I could see the doubt eating at him. All those little things that never made sense were suddenly clicking into place. Lucy's red-brown hair that neither of them had. Her facial features that didn't match anyone in the family. Diana's constant need to keep me away from Lucy. The next week was crazy. My dad actually got that DNA test done. He came to my office when he got the results back. He didn't even wait to get home, just walked in, sat down, and broke down crying. The test showed 0 chance that he was Lucy's father. Everything he thought he knew about his life for the last 24 years was a lie. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even happy. This was proof that I'd been telling the truth all along. But watching my dad cry in my office just made me feel empty inside. This man who'd always seemed so strong, who had terrified me as a kid, looked completely broken. It wasn't a victory, it was just sad. He asked about Ryan. Did I know where he was? What he did? I told him the little I knew. Ryan used to hang around the homeless spot sometimes, usually messed up on something. I hadn't seen him in years, though, and had no idea if he was even still alive. My dad walked out of my office looking like he'd aged 2 decades in 10 minutes. But he wasn't defeated. He was furious. I figured that was the end of it. Let them deal with their own mess. It wasn't my problem anymore. Then Claire called me at work the next day with shocking news. It turned out my dad had gone home and completely lost it. Diana tried to spin it like always, saying the test had to be wrong, that the lab made a mistake. But for the first time, my dad wasn't buying her lies. Decades of manipulation and lies came crashing down all at once, and my dad snapped. He didn't just yell at Diana, he hurt her badly. She ended up in the hospital with 3 fractured vertebrae. The doctors said she'd probably need pain medication for the rest of her life due to the severity of her injuries. Lucy was the one who called the police. My dad got arrested right there in their living room. They're talking about a sentence of 3 to 5 years, since he has a clean record, and his age might work in his favor. But Diana's family is pushing for the maximum sentence possible, and they have some influence in the community. And Lucy? Her whole world just collapsed overnight. The wedding's off. Turns out her fancy lawyer fiancé, Steve, wasn't interested in inheriting this level of family baggage. Now she's been blowing up my phone, begging me to help her find her real dad. Claire keeps telling me to block them all, to walk away and be done with it. And she's probably right, but part of me can't just cut them off completely. Not for Diana's sake, not for my dad's, but for Lucy. She didn't ask for any of this. Everything she thought was true about her life just turned into a lie. She's a victim in all this too, even if she was treated like a princess while I was thrown away. Then today I heard that Diana's already hooked on the pain medications. Her family checked her into rehab. Lucy's staying with her aunt and refuses to even speak to Diana anymore. My dad's looking at real prison time. Their perfect little family is gone, just like that. And the weirdest part? I don't feel good about any of it. I thought proving I was telling the truth would feel satisfying, that I'd finally feel some kind of justice. But it just feels empty, like watching a house burn down long after there's anything left inside worth saving. But at least I'm focusing on my own family now. Claire is pregnant again, a girl this time. Those extra bedrooms in our house are finally going to good use, just not in the way my dad and Diana had expected. Funny how life works out sometimes. However, after 2 months since everything went down, things have gotten even more complicated. My dad's trial was last month. I didn't go. My lawyer advised against it, plus I honestly didn't want to see any of them. I found out through Lucy that he got 3 years. It could have been worse, but the judge took his age and clean record into account. Still, at 58, 3 years is a long time to spend in prison. Diana is still in rehab. It turns out she'd been taking pain pills way before my dad put her in the hospital. Her sister told Lucy that Diana had been using them for years and just hid it really well. That explains a lot. Why she was always so paranoid and making up crazy stories. She's looking at least 6 more months of treatment before she might be released. Lucy's been, well, she's not doing great. She went looking for Ryan on her own, asking around at homeless shelters and places like that. She finally found someone who knew him, only to discover that he died 2 years ago from an overdose behind some convenience store. Lucy completely broke down when she found out. She keeps texting me these long messages at 3 a.m., talking about how her whole life feels like a lie. She says she can't even look in the mirror anymore because all she sees is Ryan's face staring back at her. I feel bad for Lucy, but Claire says I need to keep my distance. She's right, as usual. Every time I respond to Lucy's messages, she gets more attached and starts asking more questions about the past. It's like she's trying to piece together a new identity from the fragments of truth she's only now discovering. The weirdest part of this whole situation is that Lucy's ex-fiancé, Steve, tried reaching out to me. He wanted to know if the crazy ran in the family because he's worried about having kids with Lucy in the future. I told him to get lost. Yeah, Lucy's going through a lot right now, but she doesn't deserve that kind of judgment from someone who was supposed to love her. I found out that Diana's been telling people I made up the whole thing about Ryan just to get revenge on their family. Even with the DNA test proving Lucy isn't my dad's biological daughter, she's still trying to make me look like the bad guy. Some of our old neighbors actually believe her version of events. Small-town people love drama, I guess. Claire's pregnancy is going well. We're really excited about having a little girl. Sometimes I look at my son playing and think about Lucy at that age. It makes me wonder if things would have been different if my dad had noticed the signs earlier, or if I'd told someone else about seeing Diana with Ryan. But you can't change the past, right? Our house feels different now. It's like all that negative energy from when they visited is finally gone. We're turning what would have been Lucy's future room, the one my dad wanted us to give her, into a nursery for the baby. Claire's got it all planned out with a pink and gray theme and little stars on the ceiling. I still think about Frank sometimes, That homeless guy who helped me when I first got kicked out. I wish I could tell him how things turned out. Show him that I made something of myself, just like he said I could. I hope he's okay wherever he is. I've been getting messages from my dad's side of the family. Some of them are supporting him, while others are mad at him for what he did to Diana. None of them ever cared where I was during all those years I was homeless. Funny how family works sometimes. That's pretty much where things are at now. I'm not sure there's much more to tell. Life goes on, you know? To everyone who's been reading this story and sending support, thank you. Writing all this out helped more than I thought it would. Special thanks to the person who suggested therapy. You were right, and it's been helping me process everything. Lucy messaged me one last time yesterday. She said she's moving out of state, starting fresh somewhere new. She asked if we could stay in touch. I told her maybe someday, but not now. I need to focus on my own family for a while. That's it, I guess. Story's over. No more drama, no updates needed. Sometimes the best revenge is just being happy, you know?